How are we doing, Chris?
Doing great. Thanks, Bobby. Glad to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you on. We were just chatting that I got a chance to watch your documentary, One Revolution, last night. Absolutely fantastic. Such an amazing journey for you through that whole process. Just absolutely incredible.
Thank you. No, it was awesome. And it really was a journey, or as they call it in Africa, it's a safari, which really
Safari.
means journey. So,
Gotcha.
yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So we got the Kilimanjaro in the background there. It's perfect.
Yes. Yes, exactly. I figured might as well, right?
Absolutely. So for those out there that don't know, Chris Waddell, 13-time Paralympic medalist. He's in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame. Stellar career as a winter and summer athlete, and then has gone on to nearly unassisted climb Mount Kilimanjaro. We were just talking about that fantastic documentary. I'm going to have a link in our YouTube description so people can go out to watch that. Highly recommend it. It's absolutely fantastic to watch Chris's kind of journey. And then you also started the One Revolution Foundation.
I did, yeah, back in 2008, actually. So
Okay.
been going for a while.
Yeah, no, it seems like it's a great cause. And you start to kind of talk about a little bit of name tags and things of that nature. So I'm excited to talk about that with you. But let's bring it back a little bit kind of towards getting into the athletic career and kind of overcoming such a huge obstacle in your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I had a skiing accident. So I was a ski racer in college and, racing Division I, that kind of thing. So I was good enough to know that I wasn't great, really, is what it comes down to. But I felt like the sport owed me something after I broke my back, and it's where we measure ourselves oftentimes, right? I mean, it becomes that critical moment, that defining moment, so often in the starting gate, and it's where we learn so much. So I felt like I'd never reached my potential. I came back into the sport, started mono skiing, and and for me, it was a way to prove, one, that I was still whole, because skiing for me was a way that I could share a thing that I could share with my friends and my family and all the people who'd been so important to me. But it was also that sense of like, I want to prove that I can be successful.
Absolutely.
So that's part of what I came back to. And I loved it too.
Yeah, the passion is definitely a big part of it. Where would you say that kind of drive came from for you?
The drive, it's kind of funny because when I think as I was approaching the end of my career, looking at my college career, that was really the end of my career. And I wanted to figure out who I really was. So I felt like the training, like the dryland training before the season, my goal was to push myself to the point where I wanted to quit. Because if I pushed myself to the point that I wanted to quit and then went past it, then it was something new.
Right.
And then it was opening up new possibilities. And really, when I had the accident, it was about problem solving in a lot of ways. It was like, okay, well, this is a far, far bigger challenge than you had planned.
Right.
But if you want to prove how good you really are, if you want to prove how strong you really are, here's your opportunity to do it. And so it was really a problem solving in a lot of ways, the accident.
How long was that problem solving for you? I mean, how long did it kind of take to figure out that path? I mean, I imagine it's got to be incredibly hard kind of in that scenario. Or for you, was it always just going, what's the next step forward, constantly kind of moving towards a goal?
It's a great question, and funny in some ways. In the year before my accident, I was at a ski race at Burke Mountain, and a woman named Diana Golden showed up, and she was in a lot of ways the face of what was the disabled team at that point. It's now the adaptive team, but the disabled team. And she lost her leg to cancer when she was a kid. Wow. And my first thought was, what's this woman doing here? Like, what's this woman with? And I looked at her, and she was in a lot of ways what we all hope to be as athletes. Like, I'm going to fall down and I'm going to get back up and I'm going to keep going. And I think that's really, in a simplistic way, that's what it means to be an athlete. It's like, I'm going to put it all out there and I'm going to fail sometimes. I mean, if you're calling this in the arena, right? I mean, I think you're sort of in tune with that. I don't want to be one of those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. Right. So,
yeah.
So she really was, that's who she was. And I gained a hero. before I had an accident. And in a lot of ways I had a model, and it was the problem solving was the stuff initially in the hospital was everything was changed. I couldn't get out of bed. I went in as fit as I'd been,
Right.
and you lose it so quickly, just so quickly. I couldn't lift myself. I remember I went to PT the first time, and I was lying on the mat. They helped me get onto the mat, and the woman said, okay, now this is how you're going to sit up. And she kind of put her hands in her back pockets and kind of walked her elbows back behind herself so that she could kind of raise herself, almost ratchet herself up. Right.
Right.
And I went to try to do that, and I couldn't budge. It was like I was Velcroed to the mat. I could not move at all. So it was starting from ground zero, and just everything. I mean, just even just like, even just, you think like you should be able to go straight in a wheelchair. Like it was, there were times I remember being so exhausted just because it felt like I was pushing with one hand and holding on with the other hand. It's sort of the rowboat mentality, right? And so it was the problem solving, but it was that was all I had when I was in the hospital. I couldn't do the physical stuff. All I could do was the mental problem solving. And the question I asked myself is, how can I be healthy? And really, how can I be healthy was, how can I look at this problem and find a solution under complete distress?
Yeah.
Despair. And to go, okay, how can I do it? And I think that was a problem solving part. I was in the hospital for 2 months. I went back to college. I was going to Middlebury College in Vermont. Went back to an almost 200-year-old school, built mostly out of granite on the top of the hill in Vermont in the middle of February in a wheelchair, after losing 50 pounds.
Oh, goodness.
Thinking, okay, that was crazy. But it was really, it really was the problem solving all the way along. I mean, it was just, I went to a place called Shake a Leg after, which was a secondary rehabilitation place, a holistic healing center.
Okay.
And I went there after my semester back at school to figure out what this life in a wheelchair was like.
Yeah.
And that was, I went in there and I thought, I'm coming in rolling and I'm walking out. And it was just every day was, okay, I don't know what it is, but there's going to be something. There's going to be that breakthrough. And it was the most exciting part of my life in a lot of ways.
Really?
Yeah, because every day had the potential to be that day.
Okay.
And it's kind of like when you're an athlete, when you start learning something new and you're like, oh, this is great. Like,
the light bulb starts to go off.
Better. Yeah. And you're like, okay, I want to get back there and something new and great is going to happen. And it was really, sort of paradoxically, that's the way it happened, when you think this is the worst thing that could have happened to you. But yet you're looking at it like, this is my greatest opportunity, and to figure out who I am, right? To earn my way into being healthy.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely, as the way you look at it, capitalize on that opportunity to, I mean, just, I was looking at like 32-time national champion, and Hall of Fame Olympic career. It's just an unbelievable career. And so how did that process? I mean, it sounds like you have those little goals you kind of start to create every day of going back to that facility and start getting that light bulb, and you start to get a little bit of momentum, and then where does it go from there?
Where it went from there, so I went to Shake a Leg for the summer and finally got stronger, right? And started getting.
How difficult is that process to kind of build that upper body strength? Because I mean, watching the documentary, one of the things was like, how many calories is he burning a day? Just I mean, super jacked, obviously, and just it was incredible.
They were telling me, I have no idea how many calories I was burning, other than what my guide was saying is that he thought I was burning about 10,000 a day. Because especially when you're at altitude and you're cold and you burn more calories. I came back and I had to go to a black tie event.
Okay.
And I put on my tuxedo and I looked like a little kid wearing my father's tuxedo. Like, it just didn't fit at all. I was so skinny and it didn't last long, obviously. But actually the jacked part is kind of funny, because I got some compression clothing, and I had to do some measurements of my arms, and my arms were actually an inch smaller in circumference than they were when I was racing wheelchairs, because that is a more anaerobic, even though it's an aerobic thing, it's really more power oriented one gear, whereas climbing the mountain, I was going for 9 or 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
And you just have to turn yourself into an engine and just keep pedaling in
Yeah.
order to get up there. And so it's about RPMs, because if you go too hard, then those muscles just never come back.
They
you
just
keep
get
going.
fried.
But yeah, so the process was, I was at Shake Leg, I got stronger. I went back to school, and my coach called me up and he said, "Hey, come on down to the ski room. I want to talk to you about something." And he had been out at Mount Hood that summer.
Okay.
Yeah, he had been out at Mount Hood that summer, and he'd seen the U.S. disabled ski team skiing, because it's just all lanes out there. It's all wide open, and you see everybody. And actually, one of his former athletes at UVM, when he was coaching at UVM, was coaching the team. And so he saw these guys in mono skis, and he's like, "You should do this. We'll buy you one of these things. We want you to be on the team."
That's awesome.
And with that, I said, "Okay, this sounds great. I'd love to do it." And I had no idea that I wouldn't know anything, but
I mean, it looks like one of the most difficult, and being an athlete and ski, it looks like one of the most impressive things. How you're going through that downhill and not skipping a beat, just barreling down the hill. I mean, it gives me goosebumps just as I'm talking about it, and it's just such an impressive. I mean, how hard is it to create and build that skill?
It is starting over from zero.
Just completely starting over.
Yeah, where you sort of like mentally, what you're supposed to do, but physically you have absolutely no muscle memory. So everything is brand new. And the analogy for me, in some ways, it's like, do you mind 1 second? About my dog is actually at the door. She's starting to bark.
No worries, you're fine.
Okay, I'll be back 1 second.
Totally fine. Yeah, take your time. So for folks out there, Chris has just had such an incredible journey. Let me read you off some of these statistics there. Two-time Paralympic bronze medalist. He got a silver at the Sydney Summer Games. Multiple 5-time Paralympic gold medalist. 13 medals in total. 2009, he was inducted into the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame. And then just recently, this past year, 2019, to the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame. Is the dog okay?
Paralympic Hall of Fame. She's okay. She's okay. She's just insistent. She runs the show. Really is what it comes down to. And she didn't want to be outside. So no, we're good. And so no, the analogy. So like when I first started mono skiing, it felt like basically like holding my breath, like trying to translate into a foreign language while holding my breath underwater. Like there was this sense of the holding the breath. It was like this sense of immediacy of like, oh, there is stuff that I have to do right now, but I don't know how to do it. And it's all this crazy translation of just of space. And that's the weird part of, like, you get off the lift and you just kind of like slide to a stop and it's no big deal and you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
I had to think myself through every inch of sliding to a stop before I could start to actually do the run.
Right.
It was starting so far from the beginning. But I was lucky. And I think as an athlete, you're lucky in that the feeling that you're shooting for.
Yeah.
It took me 2 years, I think, to find that.
Well, it seems like with your kind of personality as well, that you just continue and you talk about that problem solving, right? So each day on the hill becomes that new problem that you're going to solve.
It does. And there were many that I didn't. That I didn't anticipate. So we had a tiny little ski area at the Middlebury Snow Bowl. It's not a tiny little ski area, but it's a it's a family kind of ski area there. And I did lots of crazy things unintentionally. Like one time I slid onto a double chairlift and the slats of my monoski were the same width. We're far enough apart as this little buckle on the front of the chair, old double chair, slid onto it. And I went to get off at the top and the whole seat came off behind me and I'm attached. And I have no idea how or why I'm attached, All I know is that I'm upside down and we're getting higher and higher as I'm going along. And I'm like, oh no, this is going to end badly. And it seemed like all of the guys, they eventually stopped it. And all of the guys who worked there pretty much showed up and pushed me back up onto the thing and said, don't do that again. I'm like, and no, I have no desire whatsoever to do that. This is, but yeah, so that was it. But I stayed part of the team, which was a really cool thing. And I'm trying to think if my brother followed me at Middlebury, and I don't know if he was there that first year, if he was there the second year. I think he was there the second year that I skied in a monoski. So I'd just go out and I'd train with them, and they let me train with them. And I really wasn't very good for a long, long time.
Well, you got to keep that problem building up, right? Problem solving. And then, so when did that start to change?
Funny enough, it started to a certain extent because there is some muscle memory just in how we carry ourselves at an event, right? Mm-hmm. So I went to my first race, I think like 2 weeks after I started. And it was kind of like a NASCAR. It wasn't anything really, really, but it was faster than I'd ever gone.
Okay.
And it was a national qualifier, and there were very few national qualifiers in the area. And I thought, okay, well, I want to qualify for nationals because I'll hopefully be better by the end of the season than I am at the beginning of the season. And I synced in. I became a racer again. And the first run I went out there and I just did what I was supposed to do. I didn't have hey, you're not good enough to do this. You're totally out of control.
Yeah.
And I probably was totally out of control, but things luckily didn't go badly. So it didn't look like I didn't know for sure that I was out of control. I hit one little bump at the bottom, and that could have been it, but I made it past it. But it really I skied all that year. I actually made it to nationals. I skied that summer in New Zealand, and I got invited to a camp with the US team in November out at Keystone. Okay. And that was where it clicked for me. Mm-hmm. Was finally, so it was 3-4 solid months, and I made some turns and went, oh, this is what it's all about. But it still took really until, it took, I made the team, I think not that following year, but the next year, and then skied my first Paralympics after that, and I still wasn't good. It was the year afterwards that I finally became good. So it was like 4 years into it.
4 years into it.
It really was.
That's pretty quick for a lot of people, though. A lot of people spend a lot of time doing something, and they definitely don't get that good that quickly. So,
well, yes, but I'd also, I had raced for 15 years prior to that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff that I knew.
Sure.
There was a lot of stuff that I just didn't know how to do. I knew what I was trying to do.
Right. Yeah. How much would you say that kind of competitive mindset really kind of helped in your approach to succeed? Like when you got into the gate and you were able to push through, how much did that kind of, because it sounds like it made a difference. Like even your first kind of push out of the start, it sounds like it was definitely a difference maker for you.
That was a difference maker, but I think going through the accident and the recovery in a lot of ways was a bigger difference maker. I remember one night when I was in the hospital, and it was basically like the first time that I was really alone. I'd had friends and family. My mother had slept in the chair next to my bed for like the first week or 10 days or whatever. Yep. So she was always there. And I think I was alone. And I remember thinking, like, this is as close to death as I've ever come, like without actually dying. Yeah. Right. Like, and like, if this is as bad as it can get, then I'm never going to be intimidated again. And I think fear is one of those things that sticks in front of us, right? That is the guard. It guards the threshold between where we are and where we want to go.
Absolutely.
And really that was more of that shaped me more than what I had done competitively. I think there was a competitive part, and I knew how to do the work, but the performance part of it really came from saying, hey, you've already seen the worst. Like just go ahead and do what you need to do. If you're going to be scared, it's going to detract from your performance.
And how interesting of a process or kind of a place is that to be in that point of time? Because I mean, I'm trying to put myself in those shoes, and it's such a difficult. I remember going through and having like a pity party when I tore my ACL, and I'm going through and I'm going through the rehab, and I'm trying to fire my leg and my leg's not responding. And I'm like, you know, this is just, so try to, if you can try to describe me, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I think that part of it is that when things are really, really bad,
Hmm.
you don't have much of a choice.
Right.
Things
Okay.
really become black and white. And I think that's where we have to learn about ourselves from those moments, because when things aren't really all that bad, when things are inconvenient, I mean, not to call a torn ACL an inconvenience,
Yes.
but you know, it's
Yeah.
not
No,
life
no,
or
no.
death, really,
Right. Of
right? In
course.
some
Yep.
ways.
Hmm.
And I think that's we have to learn from those black and white times in our lives to say, okay, I'm really good at getting in my own way.
I like that.
I'm
Yeah. It's good. It's true.
getting frustrated and quitting, you know, and in some ways it's kind of like, and I know I've done this too, where you blow out of a course and you're like, oh, you know, and you're swearing and this and that. And in so many ways, it's like, you're doing that for everybody else around you, right? Like
Right.
that, like, no, I'm really better than this. I just, you know, so don't pay any attention to that. This isn't the way it's supposed to go. I'm actually really good. And I think that's the hard part. That's the human part, is trying to figure out how we can maintain that sense of, I call it like winning the moment.
Okay.
And it's it's a sense of of optimism, you know, of
Okay.
like maintaining a sense of optimism in these difficult times, and recognizing that environment that I create is the one that allows me to heal.
Okay. Yeah. I really like the winning the moment. I like that a lot. Kind of keeping that optimism going, and absolutely. So would you say those are, you know, kind of winning that moment, keeping some of that optimism going forward really kind of helped keep keep that successful drive going for you?
I think it kept the successful drive going, but it
Mhm.
also it kept me healthy.
Kept you
And I
healthy.
think one of the things that's really easy for us as athletes, oftentimes we think that we're going to succeed almost in spite of ourselves.
Hmm.
Like, we talk to ourselves worse than we'd talk to anybody else. You know,
Right.
you'd never say some of the stuff to somebody else that you say to yourself, right?
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
They wouldn't be very happy with you. Like,
Yeah. Of course.
if you did, and sometimes it's straining and struggling that we feel like we're demonstrating that we are that we're really trying, you know. And the analogy for me in some ways is like, it's the difference between like 100-meter sprinter, like a Usain Bolt
Hmm.
sprinting, versus like the kid in Little League,
Right.
right? And if
Uh-huh.
you do it in slow motion, and you see like Usain Bolt's like face like
Yeah.
bouncing up and down, like
Yep.
everything's relaxed, that is not going into making him go faster.
Right.
Whereas the Little League kid is there, like head like pointed toward the sky, like,
Exactly.
you know, just grinding, and teeth are grinding and everything, and doing whatever, and basically like digging a hole in the ground, really, not actually going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the problem for us as athletes, is that we get this sense of like of we get in our own ways. We don't allow it. We don't allow ourselves to perform at the best level, really. And
Right.
so that to me is kind of that sense of winning the moment. And how can I allow myself to create? How can I allow myself to have fun?
Hmm.
Because it can turn into work.
How did you allow yourself to have fun?
I think that it really was being conscious of it being fun,
Hmm.
and saying, look, when I have fun is when I'm performing at my best. And some of it is tricks as well. So this might not sound like fun necessarily, but it's to get out of my own head. So I'd try to convince myself before I started that I'd already made a mistake, that I had nothing to lose.
That's
That's
good.
it. Before I go through the starting wand, you know, that's it. I've
Yeah.
already I've already made a mistake. I've already blown it. And
That,
so it frees me up.
right. That's a good mentality. Would you say, do you use that as well, like when you're going into some of your public speaking and stuff like that? Because I know that's one of people's biggest fears, is going out and standing in front of a big crowd and being able to kind of just talk. It's amazing how it can be difficult for some people. Luckily for me, it's not too bad. I don't have too many issues with it, but it's funny that, I definitely know a lot of friends and stuff like that are like, don't make me talk. And it's in front of like 10 people, let alone, some of those speaking engagements you've done.
Oh, it's funny because sometimes 10 people is worse than like 10,000. 10,000 becomes an amorphous group, and it's almost like they are more comfortable. But 10 sometimes is more intimate and can be more challenging, I think. But speaking, because it's like 95% of people rank, public speaking worse than death.
Yeah, at a death or something. It's crazy.
It's like scarier than death. You're like, well, you're probably not going to die up there. So it should be below. But anyway, I try, one of the things I try to do when I speak is to really say something when I start. There are a lot of people who go out there and they kind of sort of warm up and ramp up to it. And for me, it's like, no, let's say something right now. Like let's put a stake in the ground and let's prove the stake. Let's go there. So then I have to catch up. And for me, it's similar to like when I was racing downhill, where downhill scared me, especially downhill skiing, downhill on mono skiing. I don't have like the torso muscles. I really have like the stomach muscles below my sternum and corresponding on my back. So I can't really like sit up. And so when I hit a jump, in whatever position I'm in, that's how I'm going. And it's sort of like cross your fingers and hope for the best. But I tried to convince myself in that my race was to the first gate, that if I could be completely committed to the first gate, that I'd done something. And the thing that's weird is that when you do that, it slows down. When you try to go faster, it slows down. Whereas if you think, oh no, okay, like this is already seeming too fast, then you're in big trouble.
Right.
And so I try to do the same thing in speaking of like, okay, let's go hit it hard. Let's go hit it hard right in the beginning. And then we're good. Then we're just catching up, and then things will slow down and it'll make sense. But it's that commitment right at the beginning.
Got to be committed. Got to be committed either all the way in or not. Right.
Yeah.
So, one of the things is I went on to watch the documentary One Revolution, and it goes through, and you get to see some of that fantastic ski career you had. I mean, 94, you dominated. You were gold all the way across the board. It was fantastic. What is that? So what does those Olympic experiences have meant to you? Kind of where you've been, and then you get to those Olympic moments.
It's proving yourself on the greatest stage, right? And that's what you hope for. You hope to earn your way. It's a lifetime of sacrifice for the hope of a moment of brilliance. Really? Yeah. And you get there and go, okay, can I perform? Can I perform the way that I've prepared? And Lillehammer in 94 was the big one for me, because Lillehammer, I had said early on in my career that I wanted to be the fastest mono skier in the world. And there were 3 classes of mono skiers then.
Okay.
And I was the most disabled of the 3. So when you look at it, it's kind of like, those with more muscles should be faster. Those who can sort of, there were guys who stood up and sat down into their ski and went, and one guy who at one point I was pushing my wheelchair through deep snow, and he asked me if he could help me, if he could give me a push along the way, because he was walking behind me. And I said, I want to be the fastest. And then in the downhill in Lillehammer, I beat everybody. I beat all the mono skiers in the world. And to me, that was such a big moment, because it was about skiing ability. It was about taking that knowledge. And, we all love the underdog, right? I mean, it's hard for us to be the underdog, right? Not that we want to be the underdog, but, if we're playing in the backyard, we're willing to be the underdog, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to take that mentality forward. And I really was the underdog. And so that experience was really the defining experience, because I felt like people had to see me for who I was. They had to see me as a great athlete, which is ultimately what I was trying to do. And that's, each games was different. I mean, I did 7 games, 4 winter, 3 summer. So yeah, it was, yeah.
What was that transition like into the summer games?
Well, I'd always run, so you ran as an athlete. This is what you do. And I gained heroes. I seem to gain heroes everywhere. I don't know about, some people seem to, it's funny. We did a who's your hero tour. I rode my bike from Seattle down to San Diego, and we were asking people who their hero was. And people couldn't really give you a hero. And I was surprised because I seem to pick up heroes. But one of my heroes was this guy named Jim Martinson, who built the very first monoski that I used. He had lost his legs in Vietnam, built a racing wheelchair because he was racing. And I mean, they went from like the 50-pound stainless steel hospital chairs to modifying those. And he was working at an HVAC company, you know, and built his own wheelchair, won the Boston Marathon with it. In 86, I think it was, he won the Boston Marathon. And people said, hey, you know, will you build me a chair? And skiing had been a huge part of his life. He'd shared it. I think he has three or four brothers, and skiing had been a huge part of their lives. And he wanted to share it with his kids. He said, oh, I'll build this thing, and then they'll get too good, you know, but I'll at least be able to share that time with them.
Sure.
You know, and then they'll eventually leave me. And they can't, like, he's 74. They still can't leave him.
That's
like
awesome.
10 years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago, he called me up and said, hey, can you get me into the X Games for the monoskier X, you know, like 65-year-old guy in the X Games. And he ended up crashing, unfortunately, in the training. But I think he would have had a chance to win it. I mean, I really do think he would have had a chance to win it, which was so cool. But he was one of my heroes. And so I went out to get a racing wheelchair built in Seattle after my first winter of skiing in a monoski, because if I wanted to be the best in the world, I had to train to be the best in the world, right? So I had to do that summer training, and this was going to be my summer training. And so I went out with him and actually skied with him, and he was the first one that I had seen who could really ski in a monoski. Like he got off the lift and he put it on edge, and his bucket is almost right on the snow. And I was like, I think I exhaled for the first time. Like, oh, okay. Like you can do this, because skiing's such an aesthetic sport, right? I mean, it's a competitive sport, but it's so beautiful. Yeah. Too. Like when you do it well, I mean, it's like ballet in some ways, like when you do it really well. And I watched him and I was like, oh, okay, this can be the same. I can't do it right now, but it can be the same. And so that was the start of it. And he was a guy who competed in both winter and summer games. And I think that really pushed. I wanted to be like him.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, speak a little bit to that of some of those other people that, you know, you talk about some of those heroes that you've kind of picked up along the way. Who are some of those inspirations, not only Jim, but other people that really kind of helped you succeed, or at least drive you?
Yeah. I mean, some of that, so Jim and Diana were huge, but some of them were contemporaries, were people like Sarah Will, who was one of my teammates. She was like 5'1", 90 pounds, and beat almost all of the men in the world.
Wow.
You know, and I was like, wow, like that's amazing. And I'm really not happy that she's beating me. It's not cool. And and we dated at one point, and she was beating me when we first started dating. So I had to get faster. I didn't like that. And she kept getting faster, so that was a problem. But so she was definitely one, and she was so good at what she did, and so smooth, and it was absolutely beautiful. So watching her, I raced wheelchairs, a couple of guys there, Scott Hollenbeck, Jeff Adams were guys that I raced with. Scott was an American guy who just was he was such a thinking man's racer, and had figured out so many of the angles. It was great to learn from him. Jeff was probably like the cockiest guy I've ever met. I felt so much cockier when I was around him, and I always seemed to race better when I was with him. I was like, okay, I need to be more cocky like him. Yeah, which was great. I don't think he'd be upset with me saying that. I think I think he knew that.
No, you got to have that confidence.
Yeah, it really was. But looking at some of those people, and just looking at people who continued to push themselves, continued to push the sport, I think that was really, those were, I just kept gaining heroes along the way.
Awesome. No, it's interesting, because there are some people there that I've talked to, you know, had on the podcast, and those inspirations can kind of come from all over the map, you know, for people to say mom and dad, and then it's been a potential business partner, or, you know, certain coach or something like that, that's kind of helped drive them along the way. And I think being able to kind of have those heroes, or those those idols to kind of look up to, and they change, right? Because we all change. We go through different moments, and while they're
Oh,
still our
yeah.
hero, I mean, it kind of just rotates through, right? I mean, I remember, especially starting out for me, it was always Johnny Mosley in
Yeah.
'98, and then after that, Jeremy Bloom and Travis Cabral, and they, it's just kind of Federer. I hope he never retires, because that's my, Federer's my guy. Michael Jordan. There's just those guys that you look up to. You have some of those pillars that I think it's interesting when you kind of talk to those people that don't kind of have those heroes, as you talk about when you're doing that ride from Seattle to San Francisco. I feel like I feel like it can only help. It's not going to hurt if you have something to kind of look up to, one of those role models, right?
Well, it makes it seem possible, I think, sometimes too, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that you look at these heroes and go, wow, like they're doing what I hope to do. So obviously that's got
Right.
to be possible.
Right.
And then, and I think, really, I think we come into sport thinking that we want to do something that nobody dreamed of, or nobody thought was possible. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want to just win. You don't want to just do what somebody else has done. You want to like push it beyond wherever it was. And certainly my same for me with my parents were huge heroes, and my
Mm-hmm.
younger brother who was a ski racer as well. So it's but I think we continually need that. We need those people. And I look at some of these people now, it just in my sport. I mean, I'm actually starting a podcast as well, and starting a television show that's
Oh,
called
cool.
Living It with Chris Waddell. And I'm looking at some of these people who are doing some things that I just think are absolutely amazing. And I look at like this guy, Aaron Fotheringham, who's like what does he call himself? I think he's the godfather of the skate park, of the wheelchair in the skate park. He's done like double backflips and a front
Wow.
flip over like a 50-foot gap jump, and just does these things that you go, it's like, it just kind of, watching him bends your sense of reality. It's he's sort of like he's like a dolly, like a dolly painting. He's turned the world into a dolly painting where you go, whoa, like you've just totally warped my world, and that's really cool. And I think that seeing that creativity and the willingness to kind of plug along is something that I think we all need. And as we move out of sport and we move into business, or we move into whatever else it is, it's like, yeah, we don't always believe in it just based on ourselves.
Right. No, definitely. You definitely need that supporting cast. You definitely start to talk about that in the documentary as well, right? Like you're on your mission there, and then you kind of have this epiphany towards the end of all the people there helping you kind of achieve such an incredible goal. It's definitely quite amazing. And so going into one thing that really thought was super interesting was the 2002 and going in and getting to light the torch.
Yeah, lighting the cauldron. I did that, and actually I got to do it because I did a fair amount of work with the organizing committee.
Okay.
And so actually the night before the Olympics, I got to light the cauldron at the city and county building.
Okay.
So this was really when the flame arrived in
Yeah.
town, and it was 60,000 people. And they tell you, don't go too fast. You have like your, whatever it is, you're like 200 meters or whatever, like don't go too fast. And everybody's cheering for you, and it's hard not to go too fast. And I shared the bus with Steve Mayer, Christy Yamaguchi, John Stockton. We were the last four.
Okay.
And I actually got to light the cauldron. And then Prince Albert was on our bus as well. And, so that's kind of the cool, like that's inside the velvet ropes kind of thing. And then lighting the cauldron for the Paralympics, being up there in front of the stadium. And it was funny because they announced me and I heard it, and I raised the torch, and and it seemed like nobody clapped. And I went, huh. And I think it was really like a sound thing where I heard it before they heard it or something. It was really, because then they started clapping, and it might have just been momentary, but
Right.
I was like, okay, all right, that's cool. I'm still gonna light it, But yeah,
that's pretty funny. Yeah. No, when the next year they in 2003 they actually held they called it the Utah Moscow Games. And essentially it was like the top 3 or 4 kids under the age of 18 or 19 in Utah, and all the same winter disciplines against kids from Moscow, and we ended up competing in that and going through, and we did the opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies, all those different events. And that was one of those things, because when the Olympics were here in 2002, I went to some of the events, but I didn't get to go to those ceremonies, and
Right.
that was one of those things that really kind of stuck with me, was when they go through and they light the cauldron, and just such like a magical moment. So to be able to light that cauldron, it's a pretty great story that you got on top of it, that you don't think anyone's even clapping for you while you're doing it. So it's pretty good.
It's pretty wild. I mean, because that goes all the way back into history, right? I mean, it's
Right.
coming from Greece. It's this flame that they've continued, that they've maintained since the start of the modern Olympics, I believe,
Yep.
right, in
Yeah.
1896. And so you're, for that brief moment, you're the custodian of the flame of this whole embodiment of the sport and hopes and dreams and all of that stuff. And that is really cool. And the pomp and circumstance, in a lot of ways, is you're competing against a lot of the same people
Mm-hmm.
that you've competed against before.
Right.
But the pomp and circumstance really is something that you earn. You earn your way into it. And that's the cool part, is you're like, okay, I'm here. And yeah, it's a little hard as an athlete though too, because you're there and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And for a moment, it's kind of like being a spectator.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, now I have to go back to work.
Yeah. I'm here to win.
That was great. Let's do what we were supposed to do.
So kind of moving forward a little bit, when did Kilimanjaro kind of come on to your radar, or something that you wanted to do once you kind of finished up your athletic career?
It's so it's funny. So you might have experienced the same thing. It was more difficult for me to retire from competitive sport than it was to break my back, because I lost a lot of my identity. I suddenly became that guy in the wheelchair. My resume was something that was entirely separate from me. I was no longer, world champion or this or that or whatever. It was like, okay, you're just an ordinary person, and how are you going to move forward? And it was really, when I was in the hospital, when I was leaving the hospital, the doctor didn't want me to leave because I hadn't been depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I became depressed after I'd proven that I could be the best in the world at what I was doing. And that was a challenge. I was out in Round Valley one day riding my off-road hand cycle,
Mm-hmm.
and I was riding down the hill after a good climb, and thought literally just like tapped me on the shoulder. I mean, well, I guess it wouldn't be literally, it'd be figuratively, but it tapped me on the shoulder, and I was like, where did that idea come from? It's like, you should climb Kilimanjaro. But it was the metaphor of climbing a mountain. We're all climbing a mountain, right? And so.
Right.
So it made a lot of sense. The Paralympics, when I was competing, we really weren't on television all that much.
Mm-hmm.
And so since we weren't on television, nobody really got a chance to see it. And I feel like if you don't get a chance to tell the story, it didn't happen.
Right.
So Kilimanjaro, it really was one idea. And I thought, okay, all right, let's do this, and let's tell the story. Let's make it happen.
Who was kind of a part of creating that with you? I mean, how long did that production take to kind of get together, and what was kind of the training involved in all that? Because I mean, it seems you can only be so prepared, and then as you see in the documentary, then you're at the mountain. It's like, all right, let's see if this winch is going to work. We haven't even really tested it for like 10-15 feet. Let's see what happens.
I know. If there was something I would do over, it would be the winch. That's for sure. Yeah, I think preparing to climb a mountain in a lot of ways is everything that's ever gone wrong in your life. That
Mm-hmm.
things go wrong and you go, okay, well, I survived that. I figured out a way out of that thing that went wrong. And because there invariably there will be something that you hadn't prepared for.
Right.
And you have to figure out how do I make this work? So there was that part of it. The training, there were a lot of people who were involved, and really my director was probably the first person. Amanda Stoddard was my director, who in a lot of ways we had a discussion. I met her in acting class. We were taking acting classes down at Salt Lake Community College, and we went out for a beer afterwards, a bunch of us. But this night it was just like, I think there were just three of us, and she had said something about, you need to be in front of the camera, and I guess I kind of held on to that and thought, okay. And so I called her up and said, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Do you want to be involved? And she was like, oh, you took that seriously? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. So we're trying to make it work here now.
Yeah.
And so she was involved. We started doing some filming, like a little promo film in November-ish of 2007. And then did a scouting trip in June of 2008, and then did the actual climb in September of 2009. And the training really, my guide was a guy named Dave Penny, and he's this sort of endurance super freak, I think, in a lot of ways. You'll go for 3-hour runs outside of Crested Butte, from like 9,000 feet to 14,000. He said when he guided in the Himalayas that he'd do 3 14ers in a day, that he'd run up one, run down, run up the other, run down, run up to the third, and sleep on the top to acclimatize. And I'm like, wow, awesome. That sounds great. And really, I was more of a sprinter. I mean, I was a ski racer, and I raced wheelchairs, but I raced up to 800 meters really internationally. So that's not even 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's pretty short, and this is 9 to 10 hours a day. So the training really was more of a callousing effect, just going out for long days and then coming back and then going out for another long day. We did the White Rim Trail in 3 days. So the full White Rim Trail, 103 miles or whatever it is in 3 days. And,
wow.
Through the desert and all that stuff and everything. And so yeah, did a lot of that stuff, just a lot of just keep going, just finding a way to keep, you can stop whenever you want. You just have to get started again.
Yeah, absolutely. How was it coming up with, how long did it kind of take to create the bike that you used? How with it seemed like that took a lot of different iterations to kind of get the thing that ended up being what you used.
Being the thing, yes.
The thing.
we were really lucky, as you saw in the film. Mike Oxberger from One Off Titanium built, he went from 0 to 100, and then we went from like 100 to 102 or something like that kind of thing. I mean, he developed the whole train. So it's a rear wheel drive vehicle. Has a steering pad that you lay your chest on, so you can steer with your chest and keep pedaling as you're going. Not a recumbent, but actually having the weight over the back wheel, so you improve traction that way. And yeah, so we started with the 3-wheeled version. We went to a 4-wheeled version. Mike had actually built a prototype 4-wheeled version that we used that actually had not suspension, but it would articulate. So each wheel could move independently. So you could roll over rocks and get kind of that rock crawler kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we went, and that's the one we brought when we went on the scouting trip in 2008. It was over 80 pounds. I mean, it was really, really heavy. And so Dave and I would do a lot of hikes, Dave Penny and I, and we would talk and, hey, what do you think if we would do this? Could we make it a little narrower? Could we move the wheels up? One of the things we did was we moved the wheels forward, so that basically the hub of the wheel is pretty much below my hip bones.
Right.
Meaning that all of my weight is going
just
in.
On the front there.
Exactly. So it just improved the traction immensely. And we made it narrower, made it a little bit lighter. It was about 50 pounds, which is still
that's a lot. Yeah, no, that's a lot.
It wasn't super light. And we were really lucky. The Easton Foundation gave us a grant to develop the vehicle. So we were able to build a few prototypes and really make it work, which was great. But a lot of that came from conversations that I had with Dave Penny. And Dave, in addition to being an endurance super freak, also was a bike mechanic in Crested Butte.
Okay.
When they were starting to build mountain bikes, and mountain bikes were kind of like, what if we put this wheel on that bike? Do you think we could do it? And I was like, I don't know. Let's see if we can do it. And so he took some test. He was like a master bike mechanic. Like Campagnolo or somebody like that had set up a test or something. I don't know who it was, but anyway, it was something like that. So he had that ability to sort of think in 3D and develop the bike. And so, yeah, that's what we ended up doing. And yeah, we called one bomba, which the orange one, which in Swahili kind of means, it's kind of like an exclamation. It's like cool or like cooler than cool, you know, it's
Cooler
like
than
you hear
cool.
people talking and then they go bomba, you know, and then they say something else. And I was like, oh, okay, that'll be the name of it. And then the one that we used on the actual climb, we put on these surly wheels that were 4 inches wide.
Yeah, they look pretty beefy.
They were really beefy, and we were running like 3 to 5 pounds of pressure or something like that.
Okay.
So the tire would just basically just encompass the whole any rock or anything. And so that one we called kubwa, which in Swahili means huge.
Kubwa.
So you might have heard in the film when I'd stop, Seki, our head African guide, I'd stop and he'd say, kubwa, kubwa. And that meant that somebody else, one of the underlings, had to go grab a gigantic rock and put it behind me so that I wouldn't roll back down the hill.
Gotcha. Okay. Kubwa. Yeah. Especially with the 50 extra pounds of that. I can't believe it was that heavy, even that last iteration. I mean, that's a lot of weight to be churning out all those. So what gear? I mean, were you mostly just in what gears did you have to rotate through? Was it kind of 1 or 2 gears, or did they give you?
Well, I mean, I had like a full 27 gears.
Okay, you had 27
or whatever.
Gotcha.
And it was also it was then halved because we had 2 chains.
Okay.
So really it was designed for climbing, and yeah, I was in probably like 3 gears. The whole, you know how it is. You're climbing a hill and you're always like, I'm going to save that one. I'm going to save that one in case I really need it. But I'm going to, save 1 or 2 if you can. Try to stay in 3rd gear instead of going all the way down to 1st and going, oh no, I don't have anywhere to go.
So you go through and, one of the big takeaways for me in that documentary is just kind of the perseverance, right? And that metaphor for climbing that mountain and just through, I mean, the perseverance of life in general, right? You've had and you've overcome such hardships, and there are some in the film, and it's amazing that you've really seemed that perseverance has helped you succeed and kind of power through failure.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most important thing. And certainly, it looks good from the film. You don't. Yeah, I feel more of the struggle than you probably felt.
Yeah.
All of the moments, it's like, oh, well, you persevered and it worked, and it's like, kind of, and then you didn't see like after I landed at home and went, okay, we made it, and and then I went, oh wow, like we're, I've the whole that was it. I was me. I didn't have the team anymore. I didn't have we were in huge debt. I had to try to figure out how to get out of debt, and so there is this sense of perseverance. And I think the metaphor for me in a lot of ways is yes, we're all Sisyphus, right? We're all pushing that boulder up the hill, but the other part of it is that the top of that mountain is the bottom of the next mountain. And
absolutely.
And we're so oriented toward, I'm so oriented toward, I don't want to make you complicit in this in any way, but I'm so oriented toward, if I make it there, all right, then we're cool. And you make it there and it's like, all right, well, you're starting over now. What's next? And I think the perseverance and the releasing ourselves from this belief that we are, that we get to some place and it's all done, and we've made it make sense, and it'll all get easier from here. And it's like, I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a Navy SEAL, and he said at the SEAL training place that they have, excuse me, that they have a sign that said, the only easy day is yesterday. That's kind of the way
there is no finish line.
And I think that was the biggest thing for me was the realization that there really is no finish line, that it's just, we just kind of keep going, and we have to enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And I think if you look back on your career, and for me, looking back on my career, in a lot of ways, the process is the stuff that I miss. Right. It's not as much the competition as it is the process, and that process of like, we got in there and we really did something. Yeah. Like I miss those 2-a-days, and you're like, really? You missed the 2-a-days? Like, is there something, is there something wrong with you? And you're like,
Yeah.
no, like that's when the metamorphosis happens. And I
Right.
think that's what we have to
No, that,
remember as we're moving forward. And that was the lesson. It was a big
yeah.
part of the lesson the mountain taught me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there really is, and I would definitely agree with you in that. Looking back on my career, and even now, just those little days where you're exhausted and you get home and you just got a little bit better, just not much, but just a little bit more, and you're completely drained and totally exhausted, but like, okay, things are moving in the right direction, and kind of that journey, right? Not the destination.
It is, and I think that some of that is it's harder to remember. I think that
Mhm.
sometimes even, and especially like on the business side of things, where it's like, well, what happened today? What happened that moved forward? Which is more of an expectation kind of goal
Yeah, of
than
course.
it is a process goal, right? Like,
Right.
what did you bring to the table today, and how did you push it forward? How did you improve your craft,
Mhm.
as opposed to what happened?
Yeah. What would you say kind of has helped? What's like a good daily habit for you that has really helped you kind of succeed and push through, and in some of those everyday priorities that you try to get done?
It is a good question, and I think it's still a daily challenge. It's the thing I wish I was better at.
Hmm.
And we talk about like speaking. I
Yeah.
am so profoundly proficient at procrastinating. I guess the alliteration is intended there, but yeah, I mean it's amazing. Like I just did. We're in the middle of the whole coronavirus. Uh, you know, pandemic right now, and I did a commencement address this past, was it yesterday? I think it might have been yesterday that I actually did it. I just recorded one, just
Yeah.
recorded it. I had done one at Middlebury back in 2011, and I used some of that. I kind of thought I could use that and just sort of recreate it. And I was like, but there's stuff I have to change. And that took me, because this things are changing too, right? So
Right.
it's not just doing the speech part of it. It's
Hmm.
how can I record this? How can I record it well enough? What do I need for equipment? How can I, and all of those things that are going to go wrong. And I had so many different tries at it. And so I think a big part of it is one, taking the process, doing one of the things that I try to do, and I really want to get better at this, is have my to-do list done before, the day before. So I do it for tomorrow, and then
Okay.
it's not what am I going to do, and really, utilizing some of those tricks that work,
Hmm.
the getting into it quickly. It's kind of like the speech. It's kind of
Yeah.
like running downhill. Like, okay, this is the thing I have to do right now, and it's like, okay, now I've started creating momentum
Hmm.
before I've realized, and getting started is the hardest part. It's easy enough just to. So those are, meditation is a huge thing for me.
Okay.
Doing transcendental meditation for, what is it? It's probably like 3 or 4 years or so now, and just 2 20 minutes, and I don't always get to 2 20 minutes a day,
Sure.
but I'm much happier and
Okay.
healthier when I
Yeah,
do
you
it,
feel
and
like
it
it's
gives.
made a pretty big difference.
I do, I
Okay.
do. I feel like it's made a difference in my health, and I feel like it's made a difference just in giving myself that 20 minutes, because it's easy to sort of plod along inefficiently,
Sure. Yeah.
and to take 20 minutes and say, okay, now I'm back and I'm better and I'm refreshed, and you learn a lot too.
Yeah. So what do you use, like a meditation app,
I don't.
or
I
you don't? Okay.
did. I went and studied transcendental meditation. So I
Okay.
went through a course,
All right.
and so that's what I do. I should probably go and do it again, to sort of
Refresher.
connect. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Make sure I know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's something that I felt was really helpful.
Awesome. Any books out there that you think would be a good pickup for people to kind of read and help with success? Any things of kind of those nature, just stuff that you're interested in at the moment?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me see if I can come up with his name. I think it's Martin Seligman. Learned Optimism was something
Learned
that I thought was
optimism.
Learned Optimism. Yeah,
Okay.
which was a great book. just in terms of how we can, how it really is as much about this sense of we have the ability to react as we
Yeah.
choose to react as well, but also sort of about the scientific process as well of like, yeah. So I think that's a great one. What else? Yeah, I know. You asked me this, and I feel like I need to pitch my own books. But
I know you got a couple on there. Let's talk about them. I know one is a children's book, right? And it
yeah.
is what is it lonely to be a four-leaf clover?
Is it lonely to be a four-leaf clover?
I like the
So
title. I like the title.
thank you. So it actually it follows in some ways our name tags program. So it's our name tags program that we do for schools is about the labels that we put on ourselves and others, which are
Okay.
often our limitations. I'm too old, I'm too small, I'm too tired, I'm too poor, I'm too fat, I'm too, we're like really good at the excuses, and it's based on a resilience thing where our motto is it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And in Is It Lonely to Be a Four-Leaf Clover, it's about a four-leaf clover that hides what makes it different,
Mm-hmm.
which is ultimately what makes it great, right? Because that fourth leaf stands for luck, right? So
Yeah.
love, hope, faith, and luck
Mm-hmm.
are the four leaves, and it hides the fourth leaf because it wants to fit in with all the rest of the clovers. And even though this is the thing that separates it, that it's actually something good. And then it meets a dandelion. My wife's a big fan of dandelions, and dandelion most assuredly does not hide. It's very Disney, but it's a little scandalous because they fall in love, and the four-leaf clover becomes pregnant, and the question is, what's the baby going to look like? My
Ah,
wife is blonde, and so it's, is it going to look sort of like elegant like a yellow tulip, or fortified like a yellow rose? And it ends up looking like all of us, as bold and fierce as the dandelion, but as unique as the four-leaf clover.
very
So
cool.
yeah, so that's what I did. So that's that. And then the other one is things I want to remember, not to forget, which is based on my commencement address that I did at Middlebury. That a friend of mine had read it and said, "Oh, you should turn this into a book." And I didn't do it the easy way, just taking the transcript and making that into a book. I actually went and sort of created some new anecdotes. And so it's all of 7,200 words, I think. But
Okay.
it's the things I want to remember, not to forget, because like you, I mean, well, maybe not like you, but me, I forget things that I've learned, and then I have to learn them again. And I go, didn't I already know this? So it's a reminder of the things that I want. And so we'll see. So yeah, so it's kind of approaching graduation season right now. So that's usually my high season. So if anybody wants a graduation
Yeah,
present,
great graduation present, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you do have to run. Like I said, I'm going to put the link for the One Revolution documentary. Everybody out there, you really should check it out.
thank you.
You can check out more from Chris Waddell at Chris Waddell Speaking, right?
Exactly. Chris Waddell speaking. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
And social media, is there anywhere anybody can follow you? Instagram, anything like that?
So it's Chris Waddell Living It on Instagram, and there are underscores under each word there. So
Okay.
it's Chris _ Waddell _ Living It underscore under each of them, or between each of them, and then Chris Waddell on Facebook. So it's just Chris Waddell. It's so you can go to my page and like my page and follow me and find all this stuff. And then One Revolution has a page as well, so you can follow One Revolution and follow our name tags. There's a One Revolution channel on YouTube, which has the film, but also has some of our name tags presentations as well. So yeah, any kids, anybody who wants to go watch, please go watch. It's all free.
Perfect. Yeah, no, excited about it, and excited hopefully for living it, the TV show and the podcast. So thanks a lot
We'll see.
for
Thank
taking
you.
the time, Chris, and hopefully love to have you on again soon so we can talk some more about some name tags and some more success and stuff like that. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
I
It's a
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thanks. Bye.
Yep. Bye, everybody.